I don't feel motivated. When is the last time you told that to yourself or to somebody else? And did you ever go farther in trying to figure out why? Now, there is a vast industry, productivity industry, that tells you all about motivation. And often it has to do with consistency and break things down into little steps and do one little step at a time. And if you are like me, you might look at all that advice and go, I that make those words, you're saying words, they line up, they make sense, but that is not my experience. So let's talk about some of the nuances or what actually makes up motivation, because I think we've made it this giant term and a very loaded term. And very few of us really understand the executive functions underneath that big giant word that help us better understand our unique brains and how to get ourselves going. Because, of course, we want to start with this and get all the way to here and get the gold star, right? Who doesn't want that? But this is not the way life works. Often, this is not necessarily the way my brain works or your brain works. So let's get into it. We haven't started yet. We want the thing done. There is some kind of finish line, right? Well, that's a terrible pen. That is a very gruesome finish line, and I am not sure I want to cross it. But the reason motivation is on my mind is because tomorrow I am leading a session thanks to the invitation of my dear friend and colleague, Heather Martinez. She has a year-long program called Make It Your Lettering Year, and this year's theme is tools. And I love great tools. All these tools are to support your ongoing creative practice. And she knows I have a whole course called Motivation Makers, visual trackers for 100% project completion. If you happen to be watching this right after it publishes, join us tomorrow. It's going to be fantastic. It will be a great hands-on experience of visual trackers that create that motivation. I don't like to say make yourself motivated because it sounds like a pretty antagonistic relationship with yourself, but I do certainly like to help you learn the tools that help you make more motivation, to be clear on what exactly motivates you. Now, I say that, hi, I'm Brandy Agerbeck, and I say that as somebody who teaches visual thinking skills so you can support your executive function. And I can say that as somebody who has produced big online courses, big online courses, and published, depending on how you're counting, 2, 3, 4 books. And I've done all that with a neurodivergent brain that moves very fast and gets very easily overwhelmed. And I've never had a boss. So there's never been that external support or extrinsic motivation to keep me going. So I know of what I speak, and I can tell you that there are very specific executive functions and dysfunction that lie below that big giant word of motivation. So let's look at what are some of the pieces of motivation. So hopefully you can better understand what works for you and what doesn't, and all of that to help you find the right tools to support your beautiful brain. That is the first challenge, which is I would absolutely love to understand what are the pieces or the steps in my project so I could get here and get this project complete. The first challenge can absolutely be organization. Very simply, I don't know what the pieces are, how they fit together, what is the sequence. I love that I just turned this around even though it doesn't matter because there's no squares filled in. But certainly one of the first things that is very important is to be clear on what are the first steps. Even if you don't know all the steps, getting clear on enough of the first steps to get going so you can get this information through those first steps and get a clearer picture of exactly what needs to get done to get from here to here. Next, you might be clear on what the steps are, but you know what? You feel a certain kind of way about it. And so often we think we can think our way out of feelings, or you might have a very real extrinsic motivator, a boss, a deadline, a something, a paycheck, where you really don't think you deserve emotions or feelings about that thing for those kind of reasons. But another absolutely vital executive function is that emotional awareness that I am feeling this particular kind of way. Now, that doesn't mean that you will necessarily resolve those feelings or remove those feelings, but acknowledging those feelings can go a long way in clearing some of what might get in the way of your motivation. So, as much as we love to be organized and clear and all those things, there might be some feelings that need to be acknowledged to be able to move forward. I just realized I made 2 of these. So, clearly, it's very important. Now, let's assume you have acknowledged your feelings about the project and you are clear on at least what the first steps are, right? You have a sense of organization. You can get going. Let's talk about the next complicating factor, and that is that very few projects work like this, meaning you get all that work done in a single work session, unless, like me, you are a procrastinator and you rely on the extrinsic, external motivation of the urgency. Like, it's the 11th hour, this has to get done. And there's, for me, I should speak for myself, the physical consequence of that, of like working really hard. But what I like about this, I don't like how it physically affects my body, how hard it is. But what I like about this is that sustained attention, that going all in and focusing only on that project. But of course, that procrastination has a lot of weight and a lot of inner critic yelling at us. So let's just move this over here, back over here. Now, some of us do know that that's the way we work best, so we plan for that. Like, how can I give myself, clear the decks and give myself all my attention for that single project where I can do everything at once? But assuming a whole lot of us don't have projects like that, whether it is the fact that it's just a really big project, or it has a lot of different steps. One of the most biggest things is anytime you have a project where you can get some work done and then you have to hand it off to somebody else and then wait till they return their work back to you. So most projects have a lot of steps in between. And like you saw at the beginning, most projects, most of our work doesn't necessarily go in this perfect little productivity guru order of do a little bit of a time, do a little bit at a time, and then it'll be done. It's a lot of projects look a little bit more like this, and then maybe that, and let's say that, and then the final work session, we get that puppy complete. Now, here, and here, there's points of friction. Absolutely a larger point of friction when you're first starting a project and getting into it, figuring out the roles or responsibilities, the process, all that good stuff. And for any one of these multi-session projects, there are little points of friction between each work session. And that is where we get into, is it my number one? No, I got one that's even worse. One of my penultimate worst executive function, which is task initiation. I spent decades of my life knowing I was a procrastinator, but not knowing that that is the executive function I want instead. So think about any time you step away from a project, what is the energy it takes to get going and get back into that work? And this is one of the biggest strengths of visual trackers, is having everything laid out and knowing exactly where you last left your work. So you can get back, look at your tracker, get back into that project and pick up exactly where you left off. You tell me if you can relate to this one. And it isn't just an issue of task initiation. It's the fact that you don't have a single project going on. You have this project, which, let's say this project is at that level of completion. And there's another complex multi-step project in the works. And you need to finish the prep for that big event coming up, or I need to finish that prep for that big project coming up. But all I want to work on is a project that looks like this, which is one of those gorgeous hyper-focused rabbit hole projects of creative work where I just get into flow state and go deep. So the challenge isn't just one single project, but all these projects competing with each other. And this is where I just get into flat out overwhelm and really struggle to start any of them. And here we do get back to the all important emotional awareness to recognize, what am I feeling right now? Why am I struggling to make any progress here? Is because of that overwhelm. And recognizing that is what I'm going through, but more importantly, having the tools to overcome it. By far, my own number one tool for overwhelm is something I call a tangible to-do list, where I will have in my space every task for all four of these projects color coded on their own sticky notes so I can grab the very next task. But let's say right now, this I can't enjoy flow state and rabbit hole on this project. And let's say, you know what, this is farther down the line. Let's set it aside. But currently, I'm working on these two projects. If I have a visual tracker for each of these two projects, I might notice that there is task overlap, meaning that the kind of work that happens in this step in this project is the exact kind of task, same task as this step in this project. So I could, for example, maybe that step is creating thumbnail images across these two different online courses that I'm producing. Noticing that, I can go, you know what, let's batch all those together and get a lot of that particular task completed because I can clearly see exactly what work needs to be done. So I can make progress on both of those projects at once. You might be thinking, Brandy Agerbeck, isn't this just a good old sticker chart? I mean, who doesn't want to add more gold stars to their sticker chart? Yes, it absolutely feels great to cross something off your list. And certainly when you make your trackers visual, you get to color in a whole space, and there's a great sense of progress in your project. But you're not going to hear me talk a lot about like dopamine hits and that kind of thing, because I think we are more brilliant and more complex than rats in Skinner boxes. Certainly give yourself the stickers. And a beauty of the visual tracker is that you are getting more organized in your work. You are able to be more efficient by grouping similar tasks together. And like I said, one of the most important things is to erase that friction of task initiation, to grab that visual tracker and go, I know exactly where I want to go next. It could be I want to complete this row and finish this particular part of this project, or perhaps I want to go deep and finish the whole set of one particular task. I hope with this demonstration, you've seen that motivation is not just this giant monolith and that you either have it or you don't have it. That you're getting a better understanding of the executive functions, that next level of detail under that giant all-important force of motivation. Notice for yourself which of these are factors for you. It could be a challenge with organization. You don't have a clear sense of what the steps are and their sequence, or it could be there are some big feelings involved and needing to acknowledge those feelings that might get in the way of getting going. Or you could have that challenge with task initiation, not only at the beginning of the project, but to get going in each subsequent work session. Or you might notice a need for sustained attention. So being able to do more work at once and go deeper into that particular project. Before I go, I'm going to get back to preparing for tomorrow's live session and my own chronic struggle with time management. In this case, it's entirely because all sorts of amazing things are all happening at once right now. But before I go, I wanted to point out two resources at your fingertips. The first is, if you want to learn all about executive function, I invite you to join me in Befriend Your Brain, Executive Function and Visual Thinking. So we get into a delicious amount of detail, very constructive amount of detail around what are the executive functions and their corresponding dysfunction, but most importantly, what visual tools support those exact executive functions. And if you're just thinking, I need motivation. Give me these visual trackers. You can find all of that in Motivation Makers, visual trackers for 100% project completion. So I have been Brandy Agerbeck of loosetooth.com and wishing you all the best making of motivation. And thank you so much for watching.